it's a health thing. It's unnatural. It's against the law of nature. And, I mean, if you want to go on and have another go of the plague, such as they had in the Middle Ages in this country, OK, go ahead, let everybody bugger everybody.
The name OutRage actually came from just the feeling that we had every day. I mean, I just used to ring Chris up almost every day at work and say, have you seen this story in the Sun? It's outrageous. And so it was, you know, it was obvious what we would call the group.
For the first time you had an organisation which wasn't just sitting in the London Lesbian and Gay Centre on its backside waiting for everybody to come to it. It was actually going out into the pubs and clubs and speaking to people and saying, this is outrage, and we're at your pub, we're at your club. You know, because we go to those pubs and clubs as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
On the night of April the 29th this year, Michael Booth was found dying in a street in Hanwell, West London. Michael Booth was at the forefront of the campaign to save London's theatres in the 70s. Booth was a homosexual. On the night of the attack, he was found near a well-known gay meeting place. He was able to tell the ambulance crew before he died that he had been attacked by a group of 6 or 7 men. Michael Booth's death was the 5th in London in the last year. Murders of gay men are notoriously difficult to solve, which means that in many cases the killers are still at large and could strike again. Last week, gay groups in London protested at the recent wave of murders.
Anti-gay crime in the capital.
Arrest the murderers, not the victims! Arrest the murderers, not the victims!
This strategy may cut down the number of attacks, but it's also driving a wedge between the gay community and the police. In the investigation of gay murders, where the evidence of witnesses may be the only lead, this may deter them from coming forward.
We are here today outside this public toilet at Hyde Park Corner because this is where the Metropolitan Police are mounting an agent provocateur, an entrapment operation against gay men. What they are doing by behaving sexually provocatively towards other men and then arresting them for indecency and unpatuning is illegal and contrary to the Home Office guidelines.
Now, gay groups fear that if the situation gets any worse, some people may take more drastic steps to protect themselves.
Not the victims!
The repeal of all homophobic laws.
Today's was the first in a series of civil disobedience protests scheduled for the run-up to the election.
The first 25 years of my life, I was, in fact, a criminal, and the 25 years that followed that, I'm 50 last year, were spent as a second-class citizen. I think it's time that this should be ended. I think we should all live under the same laws, and so I think it's necessary to break the law to achieve this.
The law they set out to break today bans marches and protests within a mile of Parliament while it's in session. The boundary line was marked by a pink ribbon cut by a Mrs. Thatcher lookalike. About 50 crossed the line, then lay down in the Charing Cross Road, where they were removed and arrested by police. No charges were brought, and a delegation continued on to the Commons to hand in a letter for the Prime Minister. OutRage planned fortnightly protests between now and the election. Tricia Ingrams, Thames News.
The Queen's uncle, Earl Mountbatten of Burma, was a distinguished wartime commander. He was married with children, but according to gay campaigners, he also had secret homosexual leanings. Today, his statue was the scene of a demonstration by members of the militant group OutRage. First World War leaders like Earl Haig were also included in the protest. OutRage say he had a number of close male friends, including his fellow army commander Earl Kitchener of Khartoum. The protesters insist that they've checked their facts, but Kitchener's biographer says they're talking rubbish. Another target was Viscount Montgomery of Alamein, who led the British to victory against Rommel. OutRage demonstrated by his statue, claiming he was a closet bisexual. The protest was part of a campaign to end the ban on lesbians and gays being allowed to join the forces. Among those taking part was a former naval lieutenant from Hammersmith, who left the service because he's gay. He said taking the decision made him angry.
I was good at my job. You know, I'd passed all my courses. There was no reason apart from being gay for me to go.
So what do you think about that policy then, about the law as it stands?
I think it's stupid. I think there's a lot of very good men and women who could be serving in the armed forces who are wasted.
A former corporal in the Women's Royal Air Force from Catford said she came under pressure for being a lesbian.
I was disgusted, and at that time I was absolutely horrified that it could actually be done, and I decided that in time I would actually serve my community by doing something to fight the homophobia within the armed forces and everywhere else.
The protesters handed in a letter at the Ministry of Defence and laid a wreath. A ministry spokesman said that allowing gays and lesbians to join the forces could undermine discipline and trust within the ranks. He dismissed the allegations of homosexuality against former military commanders. John Taylor for Thames News.
Do you think the reaction inside that building is to today's demonstration?
I would imagine they're slightly horrified, slightly tremulous, but deciding that they'll carry on as usual, unfortunately. But we'll just keep hammering, because it'll have to change one day, because Europe will make them, even if we don't.
This is the first of a number of demonstrations OutRage is organising in the run-up to the general election.
Quite clearly, this is part of an ongoing campaign to draw public attention to the fact that in the last few years, more than 300 lesbian and gay service personnel have been dismissed from the forces, not because they had sex, but simply because they were lesbian and gay. A further 32 were imprisoned, some for up to 2 years, for completely consenting behaviour, which would not be a crime between civilians.
The Ministry of Defence said tonight that it was considering decriminalising homosexuality between consenting adults over 21 in the armed services. In short, that means discharge, but no court-martials or prison.
The police to arrest us for doing this. Believe it or not, in 1989, 462 gay men were convicted for what Nick and Louis just did.
And there was a synchronised 30-second mass winking session.
It's because there's so many laws against gay sex, it makes the whole scary thing of HIV and AIDS really possible, because people are very, very scared, so they do things very secretly, and they do things very unsafely because they won't educate themselves, because they can't even deal with the fact that they're having sex with a man, never mind worrying about kind of like, you know, HIV and AIDS.
It's all right to be lesbian, gay, bisexual, whoever you are, be yourself, enjoy yourself, and be happy.
As the song goes, sing if you're glad to be gay.
Or even if you're not quite sure.
Consent for gay and bisexual men. I think it's disgusting that the British law, which allows me to drive, drink, vote, supposedly sign myself up for a lifelong commitment in marriage, sign up for 7 years on a contract in the armed services, does not deem me able to decide who I want to sleep with, who I want to love. We're going past here now for the drop your trousers and send over for a member of Parliament action. 4, 3, 2, 1. To confess to having kissed or cuddled or caressed their partner in a public place, contrary to the public decency laws.
They said that they would pass it on to the Crown prosecution, and then they would decide what further action would be taken.
We've been having sex for the last 12 hours. He is 19 years old. I am 28. Hello, Sister Frigidity. This isn't a confession, it's a witness of pride.
But being as I don't go to church and confess, I guess I have to talk to these police officers.
I'd just like to confess to having sex with a Member of Parliament on Hampstead Heath when I was 19 years old.
Gay rights supporters were told to make a noise for freedom, and that's exactly what they did. They gathered at Piccadilly Circus, bringing whistles, drums, tambourines and foghorns. Even the outfits they sported were loud, but their message was simple.
We're here because we're queer, because we are here because we're queer.
I agree with this. It should be, and we should get some new laws of the land. Okay.
The march had been organised to mark the 25th anniversary of the 1967 Sexual Offences Act. Protesters say it's a discriminatory and outdated law which turns Britain's estimated 5 million gays and lesbians into second-class citizens.
We want to draw attention to the government, the fact that Britain has more anti-gay laws than any other West European country. We think it's time that Mr. Major honoured his commitment to a class of society by giving lesbian and gay people full and equal human rights.
Celebrities like the filmmaker Derek Jarman and the chart-topping singer Jimmy Somerville were there to add their support. About 400 demonstrators took part, marching to Downing Street to present a letter to the Prime Minister. It calls on John Major to repeal what the demonstrators see as anti-gay legislation. Minor scuffles broke out when they staged an impromptu sit-in outside the gates, but there were no reports of any arrests. Rob Gillis, Sky News.
Back in London, campaigning group OutRage led a march on Downing Street on Saturday, marking the 25th anniversary this week of the 1967 Sexual Offences Act. A major step forward at the time, this legalised in very limited circumstances sex between men over 21. But protesters were angry that in some respects, lesbians and gays in Britain now have fewer legal rights than we did in 1967.
Alongside West Germany and Luxembourg, the UK is one of the last European countries with different ages of consent for heterosexuals and homosexual men. But for how long? Two British men are currently taking their government to the European Court of Human Rights.
Born gay at 21, you don't become gay when you're suddenly 21. I've been gay all my life. I'm not going to wait until 21 until I find out what it's all about.
Pressure is growing for the European community to recognise gay rights within wider perspectives of discrimination and human rights.
If we're going to have a united Europe, it should be a united Europe for everyone. Not just a united Europe for big business, but a united Europe for the people. And among the people of Europe are about 32 million lesbian and gay people.
Gay clergymen have been speaking out over the Church's ruling that they must abstain from sex. They say it will drive gay churchmen back into a world of secrecy and prevent gay Christians from joining the ministry. But the Bishop of Oxford insists that the report is a positive step in welcoming gays into the Church. Caroline Wyatt reports.
The most strident reaction to the Church of England's statement came from the gay protest group OutRage, which disrupted the House of Bishops press conference before being ejected. The statement, Issues in Human Sexuality, is the Church's latest attempt to clarify its thinking on sexuality and homosexuality in particular. It recommends chastity for all Christians outside marriage, total abstinence from sexual relationships by gay clergy, but it also says that lay homosexual Christians in permanent relationships should be accepted by the Church. This report is the clearest signal yet that the Church accepts homosexuality, but it also shows it's likely to be a long time before homosexual clergy can admit publicly to their sexuality.
Following the recent Vatican letter urging American bishops to support anti-gay discrimination, OutRage made a dramatic intervention into morning mass on Sunday as organiser Peter Tatchell turned evangelist.
It is blasphemy for the Catholic Church to claim that love between homosexual persons is contrary to Christian teaching. It is a moral evil for the Pope to say that homosexuals should be denied human rights. The anti-gay prejudice of the Vatican says we are human beings with human dignity and feelings and love just like you. And we are fed up with the prejudice of the Catholic Church, which is inciting hatred against us. We ask the Pope to stop inciting hatred against lesbians and gay men. We urge all Christians to search their conscience and to cast out bigotry and intolerance.
Don't worry, they're only volunteering.
Let
lots of people give their time and their money free for what they believe in. That's what OutRage is all about.
OutRage is about fighting homophobia, violence and discrimination against lesbian, gay and bisexual people.
I don't want the church to be telling me that I'm an abomination.
I wouldn't come by myself, but I'd come with this group of people. Yes, we're here to support each other.
But we do things slightly more theatrically.
I just want the world to change. I don't want